All right, welcome back, everybody. Hello, hello. How are you out there? Let's see. Let me pull up my chat window. If you can, type in chat where you're logging in from. I always love being able to see that and also make sure that chat is working. This is our last session of the day for the Storytelling in Learning Gathering. If you didn't know already, we did have a couple cancellations for sessions this week. I'm trying to reschedule both of those. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Darlene and Sarah in for future TLD cast to make sure that we can add these sessions back to the series. But for now, I don't have anything scheduled yet. All right, and there is Dr. Lindley, Susan Spencer, Keegan. Nice to see you. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, Keegan. Let's see, Nola from Dallas. Awesome. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm sure more folks will be jumping in as the session proceeds. And once again, so happy to have my friend Christy Tucker here. Christy has contributed so much to TLD sessions, and it's always great to have her vast knowledge and just her sparkling presence here on TLDC. Christy is a learning experience design consultant with over 20 years of experience helping organizations create engaging, scenario-based learning. She specializes in designing realistic stories and characters that promote skill transfer to real-world environments. Christy is also the author of the long-running Experiencing E-Learning blog and a frequent speaker at industry conferences, including in a couple weeks, DevLearn in Las Vegas for any of you that are going to be there. And and with that, I'm going to go ahead and just hide my screen and let you take over, Christy.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming today, and for anybody who's listening to the recording afterwards. I am going to share. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second to get my slides up. So this is going to be an interactive session, and you are going to be practicing. So if you were planning on catching up with your email, please close it. And you will be, we're going to be doing some writing today, because how are you supposed to learn about writing unless you practice doing writing? So we're going to do some of this in chat, and some of this when we get into some longer things. It may be easier to have a document open. So if you want to have a Word document or a Google Doc blank handy, but we have practice exercises so that you get to try this out. This is a session that I have done previously. I did it as a bring your own device session for an in-person conference previously, and I haven't done this full session online. So I think it's going to be fun to see how it works here. But I think this is a great fit, and you'll see it'll be so interesting, I think, listening to both Rance's presentation and Kim's presentation, that I think there are some elements in this that actually connect to both of those as we are going through this. So I will also be attempting at least to keep track of the chat as we go through. But our goals for today, my goals with this session is we're going to create a character, and we're going to practice both writing and revising some dialogue. Those of you who are familiar with my work may know that I do lots of things with branching scenarios, and I do things in Twine, and nothing that we do today is specific to any tool. It isn't even really specific to branching scenarios. This works for video scripts, for microlearning, for stories that you use as examples, for interactive stories, for really any of it. This is all kind of foundational skills that underpin all of those types of ways of using stories and scenarios and simulations, however we define those terms and delineate those differences. And again, this will be hands-on. But first, I'm going to have you just listen to a story about these two characters, Terrence and Eva. Terrence says, "Thanks for meeting with me today, Eva." Eva replies, "Of course. I'm always happy to chat. I'm really glad to have gotten this job. I've already learned a lot in these 2 weeks. Feel like things are going really well so far." Terrence rubs his forehead. "Well, about that. Do you not think things are going well?" Terrence replies, "Well, I know you're new, so you're still learning, but I need you to check in with me more often." Eva nods. "Oh, okay, sure. That would be helpful, actually. Can we set up a weekly meeting?" "I was thinking maybe we need a daily check in." Eva raises her eyebrows, which Terrence notices. He continues, "Just for 30 minutes, but I want to see what you've done each day and go over your work." "Daily? I, okay. Sure, we can do daily check in meetings. I can show you what I've done." Terrence leans forward. "See, what I find with new folks in this role is that I really need to double check everything. Half the time I end up redoing everyone's work around here. I have very high standards." "I see. Is there anything in my work that you've seen so far that doesn't meet those standards?" "I've seen a few things. We really need precision in this documentation, you see." Terrence points to a document. "For example, in this report, you used line spacing of 1.15 instead of 1.1. Eva looks confused. "Oh, was that in the style guide?" Maybe not. But everyone here knows that's the standard I like." "And is there anything else that everyone knows that I should be doing too?" Terrence turns to the second page of the document. "Yes, I've made some additional notes on this report." So, how did that conversation make you feel? Time to look for a new job. It's icky. Terrence is giving the ick. It's uncomfortable, right? It is. Yeah, dun dun dun. Yeah, you like this is the setup for a great, you could absolutely go into a great employee conflict down with my micromanagement training with this, right? And it is, I think, echoing some of what Rand's talked about of having that human element and of feeling something. And there's plenty of options for sharing information and training. In fact, with AI, it is even easier and faster. If all you need to do is share information, there's lots of ways to do that. But getting people motivated to change their behavior to do more does require feeling something. And we can have characters and take a few minutes to have a little story and make people feel something and make people care. Make people want some resolution of the conflict between these characters. And I didn't do fancy videos. I did not do any AI, avatar conversations, even though that dialogue would actually be very easy for me to rebuild and put into a video. But I don't need any animation. It's all in the writing. It is all in the dialogue and how that is written. So let's start with characters. When we're talking about characters specifically for training, we need characters who are relevant to your audience. Learners have to be able to see themselves in your main character. All of these people on this slide, these are all very different characters for different audiences. And you're all very smart. I'm sure you wouldn't put the construction worker as the main character if your audience is nurses. But I have for sure seen people make the manager the main character when the audience is the frontline employees, or vice versa. Or I've seen people focus the story on kind of the wrong part of things, where people had a harder time, had to work more to see themselves in that main character. And that's not to say that you always have to have a perfect match in roles and in for every training. That isn't realistic, because often we're writing training for a range of audiences. But if you understand your audience and can figure out how to get them, first of all, just in a job and a role in an organization that looks like your audience, you are already on the right track. So, as a very basic example, let's say you were doing training for new sales representatives at a company that sells STEM software to schools. So, your main character then is Matt, who just started as a sales representative at this company called Metric Success 2 months ago. Right? We don't need to overthink this too much. That character should have the same job and the same kind of work environment as your audience. That does mean sometimes that you have to do some research to figure out what that audience looks like and what that work environment looks like, because we don't always know. And so you may have to do some study. You may have to ask AI to help you understand what that environment looks like, and then obviously check it. I also think it's really important that your characters have realistic names. It should not be Sally Salesperson or Mike Manager. Those sorts of alliterative fake names automatically make your story feel less relevant. But there are a bunch of name generators out there. I have several that I've used. That last one on there is a business name generator as well. If you need to like have a fake organization name, I like using those. So having concrete details is part of what makes stories feel real. When we create characters, we should also be thinking about diversity. There's a lot of different dimensions of diversity. You're not going to represent all of these in every character, but you should be thinking about, well, how do you represent these things? Age, gender, race. If thinking about your audience, if your audience is, I've written training for WIC counselors. WIC is the Women, Infants, and Children Nutritional Counseling and Support. That workforce is 70 or 80% women. So we tend to overrepresent women in the characters and the scenarios. There's always some male characters, but the reality is that both the people they serve and the staff tend to be pretty heavily weighted towards women. So that's how we represent that. Thinking about race and ethnicity, thinking also about making sure that it is not always, say, a white person as a manager and a person of color as an employee. Thinking about balancing those elements of diversity. So, practice activity. So we're going to be working on a scenario. And I've got some of the background about this scenario here, which I will not read the whole text to you. But we are thinking about early in career instructional designers. This is your audience. You're going to write training for instructional designers. And helping IDs work with SMEs and manage conflicts, hard conversations with SMEs. And so our objective is to help the instructional designers collaborate with SMEs and have hard conversations, create engaging e-learning, use appropriate strategies. So we're going to build on this over time. And I'm going to give you a minute to read it. All right. In the chat, think about the way you want to write the scenario given this, that we're going to do the need and the audience. Give me the a name of a character for the scenario. Give me at least an approximate age. Something like, mid-30s or something is fine. Something maybe gender, race, any other elements of diversity that you wanted to call out specifically, and let's put it in chat. And I'm going to put some name generators in here as well. All right. We've got a Taylor, we've got a Lola. So, Susan, I would say that you should think about what pronouns you're going to use for Taylor. And they, them is totally a valid choice. Awesome. Yes, the tradition of naming characters after people in your lives. I remember my first instructional design job. We had an ID who was a great writer at things, but her daughter's name ended up in a lot of different scenarios. It was one of the Easter eggs that showed up in a lot of different places. All right. So we've got quite a few, and we are thinking. I would agree in this. Like we've everybody's picked either something in like 20s or in their 20s or 30s for age, and that makes sense, right? We're talking about somebody early in their career. Now we of course know that there's plenty of instruction designers who are actually career changers who have already, switched from some other career. And so you might pick somebody you might have somebody who's actually 50 and is coming from 15 years of teaching background, or 20 years of teaching background. You could do that sort of thing, and that would also make sense potentially, right? Yeah, so the European. So, and I think you're going to, have some reflection of the audience that you sort of imagine for this. So now, thinking about your character. By the way, if you like somebody else's details that they put up, feel free to steal them. We're, collaborative. There's some collaborative brainstorming if you like somebody else's. So, continuing with your character, think about, we know that their job is probably an instruction designer, right? New and early career instruction designers. But if you can think about something about that role of like what kind of instructional design are they working on? What does their work environment look like? And some sort of company name. Um Again, using the a business name generator or something. Those kind of concrete details do make it feel more real. And I'll give you a minute to think about that. And I would say at least add one of these details. If you don't feel like adding all of the details, at least give me one of them. So we have ed tech enterprises. I love it, Linnea. Linnea, am I saying your name correctly? Ah, Linnea. Got it. Thank you. All right. So Kim's got one where they're thinking about so the focus is on creating mobile learning for service techs. Great. Ren's thinking about it as a junior ID in an office environment. So think about somebody who's in a team where there are some senior IDs. I like it. Yep. Dr. Lindley's has working with faculty course writers in remote small university, right? So all of these are going to sort of shape what else happens in the story, right? All of these, even with that same basic goals, you're going to get a different flavor from those environments. And this is, of course, part of how we make a story feel real to our audience, is by having these sorts of details and having them feel right. Then we have to dig a little deeper. We think about the motivation and the worries. So, thinking about what motivates your character, what's important to them, what do they want, and what worries your characters. And this goes for both your main character and for other characters. There isn't, most of the time in a story, we don't really have a villain, but we do definitely have conflict. And thinking about what people want and what they're afraid of, what they're worried about, that helps shape our characters, helps have the dialogue, helps have that conflict between characters if when they want different things. Because we're doing it for training, we also have to think about how to tie that to our objectives. So if I go back to my example previously about the sales reps, so the business problem is company's been expanding, they've hired new people, but there's problems with objection handling. So that's the business problem that we're tying to. So in that case, that actually leads pretty clearly to how do we have our main character reflect that? Matt's excited about the new role, wants to be successful in this new job that he's gotten hired at 2 months ago, but he's anxious when he's talking to the school admins and they complain about things, and he's having trouble handling those complaints. So it makes him anxious. He's worried about it. So we can think both about the motivation and the worry. So what drives your instructional designer? What do they want? What are their goals? What are they motivated by? Meeting deadlines and clean course writing documents. Love it. And having a character who's driven by meeting deadlines, already like knowing that, even though you're never going to say in the story, this character likes meeting deadlines. You knowing that in the background automatically makes it easier to write dialogue for this character. Ren says, applying what he learned in school to real world constraints and requests. Lola wants to feel confident to make decisions that will create a good course without making the Smees who are older feel like she's contradicting them. That's a great conflict, right? The age difference in the conflict. Yeah. Taylor's motivated by doing their work correctly without errors, anxious about missing deadlines, want to be considered an ID who does a really good job. Alana says helping their colleagues succeed with the training. Elizabetta talks about creating courses that change how people think and have some fun in the process. And yes, and some of you are already kind of thinking about the next question, which is about the worries or fears, the challenges that they face, some sort of problem, something that frustrates your character. And I think you've already sort of seen that, like, there's both sides of this, right? You've got both the thing that you're motivated by, but like Kim talks about, that her character was a service tech. He feels he can improve on the current field training offerings, but his boss created the existing training and doesn't see an issue, right? Frustrated by slow course writers who cannot follow instructions in the writing templates and want to do things their own way and mess up those clean documents. Isabel wants to do a job, enjoys teamwork and collaborating, anxious about coming across as unlikable or bossy. Yeah. So these are all great details. And again, having this sort of background for your character can make it much easier. Now you've got something of a profile. You've got somebody in mind as you are writing. And again, this information is not going to go in front of the learners, but it is going to shape what you put in front of the learners. So I'm at the halfway mark. But before I switch to talking about dialogue, do you have any questions specifically about characters and these sorts of details? And Susan, I see, has added, Taylor's worried about interpreting the Smee's content incorrectly, having too many revisions and missing deadlines. All very real, very authentic feeling worries and challenges. All right. Well, I'll keep an eye out for questions, and we will move on. So I get to give you more time for writing practice. So Kim asks, do the stakeholders easily agree to these, and do they want to control the characters or have them too perfect? So, I think, of course, I'm going to give a great instructional design answer, which is, it depends. Right. So I have had stakeholders push back about characters, but you know what? So when I do, especially when I do like more complicated branching scenarios, we start with, and I start with a scenario overview, basically a 1-paragraph brief of, here's the setting for the scenario. Here's the main characters. Here's the challenge. Here's what we're doing in it. I don't necessarily give them like these goals and worries in full detail like this. I probably, okay, the reality for me is that a lot of this is in my head and it isn't actually in a document anywhere. But I do give them a scenario overview, and I have had times where they have come back and said, nope, that's not realistic and we need to do something else. And sometimes I do have to negotiate. However, I would much rather have those negotiations early in the planning process when we think about, well, who is this character and what motivates them? Because if it's off, then there's probably something wrong. Like, did we miss something in the needs analysis? Are we actually targeting this correctly? Is there something I can do to revise this to make it feel more authentic to that audience? I would much rather have those conversations. And if we have to go around 2 or 3 times to get those characters right at the beginning, I'm actually okay with that in that early stage. It's like, if we want to do 3 rounds on the design document, I'd much rather do that than after I've written out a whole script and storyboard. I won't say that I've had SMEs and stakeholders obsess too much about getting the characters perfect too much. But I have had some say that, like, no, the role isn't right, or we need to like change this nuance, or can we make their backstory this? Can we make sure that the next character reflects some other aspect of diversity? There, it's pretty common for there to be some negotiation. Great question though. So let's think about dialogue. Yeah, perfect in having the character always do everything right. Um I have had some of that, sometimes of the we don't want to show mistakes in a story. We don't want to have people disagree. We want to have people to agreeable. Um and I'll talk a little bit more about like having characters be perfect and agree all the time and do everything right, show no mistakes. Um because that is a real challenge. I've got something a little later about that. So, when we're thinking about using dialogue, we often have e-learning scripts that look sort of like this, right? Here's the reasons that coaching and mentoring are important in our organization, followed by 4 bullet points. I have written many trainings that look like this. I bet you have too, right? Like, this is easy, and look, sometimes what we need is to have something like this. But we can take these kind of bullet points and turn them into dialogue. One thing that I've done in some of my courses is have essentially, instead of one off-screen omniscient narrator who narrates everything, you have 2 characters talking back and forth. It tends to be, say, a mentor plus somebody who's new and in that role of the audience. So that junior ID and a senior ID maybe. Or in this one, this was an example from a coaching and mentoring class that did have where it was a newly promoted manager who was having trouble with coaching and mentoring, with coaching his employees. And so this is him talking to like the manager above. This has the content in it. But instead of listening to the one voice, it's listening to the 2 voices. And it's more conversational. Is this still a little obviously fake? Sure. It's like in the, CSI programs when suddenly people who are all experts working in a lab together pause to explain to their coworker the cool science that they're doing, which clearly those characters would actually know, right? Like this is a thing. It is somewhat contrived, but it can work. So when you're writing dialogue, one of the first things you do need to do is put it in quotation marks. And so instead of having something, so a lot of times in scenarios, IDs will sort of paraphrase what someone is saying and have that invisible omniscient narrator tell what the learner says instead of letting the character speak for themselves. Robert tells Sophie he wants level 3 e-learning. But we can put that in dialogue instead. Robert replies, let's go with level 3 e-learning. I want to see all the bells and whistles. People will really be impressed with our courses. This is not a 100% hard and fast rule. There are times that you do need to just describe something, move the plot along, and get to something more important. But if your scenario feels flat, this is one of the things to look for is, are you telling people? Are you paraphrasing somebody's dialogue instead of actually putting it in dialogue? 2 ways to do this, either with dialogue tags, which is this Gene explains. That's a dialogue tag, right? It's the so-and-so says, comma, followed by quotation marks. That's a dialogue tag. Or you can do it script style where you have the name of the person followed by a colon and have it the other way. I do not care which one you are using. Use the one that you're more comfortable with for today. Both of these are valid depending on what you're doing. So you've done your instructional designer. I am going to give you a SME. So this is Stefan. He is very passionate. He wants everybody to be excited about his topic like he is. And he is very interested in games and new technology and the fun new things that are going on. He worries that e-learning is not going to be engaging enough. So this is who your instructional designer is working with. This one might be easier in a document because I think by the time you're writing dialogue, the tiny chat window is not necessarily the easiest way to do this. So if you want to open up Word, Google Docs, Notepad, anything. So here's a paragraph. Actually, 2 paragraphs now. I expanded it. it was originally, and we're going to take it from that omniscient narrator telling you the dialogue and turn it into actual dialogue. And I am going to give you a couple of minutes for this because this is going to be a little bit longer exercise. I should have had some background music for this. Next time I do this, we got to get Luis's band as our background music while you're doing writing exercises. We're going to plan it next time. Ren's got a great question. My brain wants to go too detailed and hash out a bunch of fake constraints. How do you avoid getting too deep in the weeds when writing a scenario? Part of that is contingent on your analysis and what you've got planned for the whole scenario and how big it can get. Right? So I've written interactive video scenario scripts where it's like, okay, well, we are going to be able to have a half day shoot in one location. So the amount of content that I can do has to be able to be done with X number of characters in one location and a half day shoot. And with a lot of interactive things, that does mean, okay, I can only have, 15 videos total. And therefore, you have to sort of know kind of what's your goal of going to, right? And sometimes it may be that what you do is write the more detailed version to start, and then you come back and prune significantly. But also keeping in mind whatever your end product is going to be, that like if you've decided that it's going to be, there's a difference between doing the 90 minutes and it's 11 scenarios like Kim's was earlier that she talked about, or if it's something that is this is an activity that's got to be less than 7 minutes total and they're going to whip through it real fast. Right? And so I think that it helps when this is harder because you don't have those constraints here, right? I'm giving you open-ended of like, you want to make this a 90-minute course? Cool. But maybe that's not what you really are doing. So I think that's a great question about how you think about it and how you plan. So we've got some samples in here too, right? So you can think through this, so you can look at this, and you don't all have to like share things in the chat. But you've got some first drafts, and I realize you may not have had time to go through the whole conversation, right? This could easily be a very long conversation, so it's fine if you just have a starting point. Things to look for in your dialogue. First of all, contractions. Most of us have been trained for academic or professional writing and to take out all of the contractions. People talk in contractions. They talk in, actually, Kim's got good examples here of like, there's the hey, there's the itted. You have those contractions. Contractions are one of the things that make writing sound more like people talking. That is especially true if it's going to be voiceover. I find that I have to have more contractions than looks right to me on the page. And so having the difference of something, I know what I am talking about is realistically probably not how Rita would say that. It's, I know what I'm talking about. It's one of the first things you can do to make it sound more conversational. And don't worry about these are long snippets, and so the chat's going to be kind of mess. Don't worry about it here. So conversational language, people use first person. It is not the one must obey the style guide. One must follow the rules. One would enjoy a train. No, we're not doing that. You would enjoy the training more if we had a game in it. You have filler words. Actually, I'm going to scroll back up. We're going to look at Kim's and we're going to go through my checklist here. So we have first person of the I saw. I don't remember. You have filler words like hey. She has the contraction of itted, like it would be great. And if you're spoken, itted is absolutely much more how people would do it. The varied sentence length, she has the one word interjections like cool and some longer ones. The informal language of of cool, or that's not important, or okay. And that you can break grammar rules in dialogue. I know that that is a trickier thing, and that is maybe a little bit more advanced, but it is fine to do something like the okay dot dot dot. This is not the more formal writing that you're doing elsewhere. So we're just using Kim's the um, as the example, because she of course knows what she's doing in this, right? So if you look at that and all of those things, that all of these aspects are part of what makes it conversational language. If you do not, most of us do not have the decades of experience that Kim does. And so it can take multiple revisions to get yourself to that conversational style. So you might start out with that sort of paraphrase version. Jean says that the style guide mandates third person language only. No first or second person perspective is allowed. And then I put it into quotation marks. Jean says, comma, and then I just have the rest of that stuff. But then when I get it into quotation marks, I can see that, oh yeah, this actually doesn't quite sound like a person. This trick of putting it in quotes is actually one of Kathy Moore's old tricks, because once it's in quotes, it is easier to see when it sounds too formal and not conversational. And then I can say our style, there's that first person. You'll, there's that contraction. It sounds a little bit, it sounds less formal. Take a look at your dialogue. You don't necessarily need to put it in the chat, but my challenge to you in your own space, read it aloud. That's one of the ways that you figure out if it sounds conversational or not. Some of these, I will say overall, I think these are great. I think we've got a lot of good things already happening of, the hey and the so cool. We've got, I love this, like something that gives Oregon Trail vibes, but for training. Love it. That very much sounds like real dialogue. I love that several of you have written pauses, right? Dashes and ellipses for pauses. Primo stuff. I love the Stefan's sighs in Susan's. And this is really fun to see everybody's samples of things too. All right. Well, I know that revisions could take more time. Hopefully this is enough to sort of give you the idea of things to be looking for, of if your dialogue sounds kind of stiff and you don't know why, these are the sorts of things to look for. Is it first person? Do you have some filler words? Do you have that varied sentence length? Do you have contractions? Informal language, are you breaking the grammar rules a bit and having it not quite be as precise? These are all the things to look for if it feels too stiff. Some of this is also a matter of showing rather than telling. This is telling. This is, again, that omniscient narrator. Oliver's a new hire. He is overly confident in his skills. Rita's been with the company over 10 years, is annoyed with Oliver, and she wants respect. But we can show this too. And we put it in dialogue And now all of a sudden it comes alive much more. So all the work that you've been doing today is showing, not telling. And it's so easy for us to get into that didactic telling mode because we're instructional designers, we're good at it. But this is another way to do that. Kevin asked earlier about having characters be sort of perfect. I think it is important to not make the characters too agreeable. So people should be skeptical. They should be impatient. In real life, it is hard to change people's minds. We do sometimes in training have to abbreviate things and get things to a resolution faster or escalate problems faster than they would in real life. And that is true. But maybe in some of these, if you had more time than the 3 minutes that I gave you for a practice exercise, maybe you would do um having some of this and putting it um having the conflict stretch out a little bit more, having stuff on, when your ID pushes back and says, oh, I don't think we've got time on this, well, can't we just add some points or a leaderboard or something, right? Something that they would push back, because that's probably what it would happen in real life. And I think that when Smee's push back on that, of like having people disagree and having them be disagreeable sometimes, that it is about, when we're doing training to change people's mind and change behavior and to motivate them, that we do have to have some of that emotion. And if you make them too agreeable, the story is too boring. And Kim, I don't think thought bubbles are cheating at all. I think there's a lot. Frankly, the last one that I had on here, this one could have all been thought bubbles. I'm breaking rules about how much text should be on screen because we're talking about writing, but this could absolutely work with thought bubbles and pictures instead of saying Rita's jaw drops. You could show her with it. This would work comic book style, and I think it would be fine. Right? You could show pictures of the jaw dropping, of Oliver crossing his arms and leaning back. I think given the time, what I would have done again was like looking at this, looking at body language. Are the characters agreeable? Does Stefan change his mind too easily? Does your conflict have a resolution, or do you leave it open? But I do want to leave a little bit of time for other questions. I know I'm 4 minutes till the hour. Yeah, you want to look at this would have been the thing of, looking at it. Are you looking for places that you're telling instead of showing? And see if you can make things more descriptive. Now, of course, the how descriptive you're going to be also does depend on what other medium are you doing. Are you doing video? Are you doing pictures to go with it? Because I'm going to write more body language in when it's just text. But if I'm doing video, maybe I'm doing if I'm working with actors, maybe I am actually writing stage directions. Or if I'm trying to animate a video or something, I might actually write some stage directions for some of that body language to go with it, to emphasize the emotions. I actually have a couple of websites bookmarked that have the like how to write body language for different emotions, to convey different emotions, and I use those as cheat sheets as I'm writing dialogue to write body language for things. And the seeing if people change their mind too easily. thinking about whether a conflict has a resolution or not. And maybe you do something, sometimes you can do a story and leave the conflict unresolved. I've seen things where we did stories and we did videos that were used to have group discussions in person, and they used them as prompts for discussions with the stories. And so leaving it sort of unresolved and saying, well, what would you do? How would you resolve the conflict? That works. So what's one thing you learned today that you can use? Put it in quotes and then revise. Yep. If you have one thing out of this, that's actually a pretty good one to take. And I saw Dr. Lynn Lee says for setting up for writing sexual harassment trainings next week. Yeah. Turning narrative into dialogue. Yeah. Gonna go rewrite a bunch of compliance training to do show don't tell. Yeah. The concrete details, reading it aloud. Yep. Turning descriptions into dialogues. And yeah, don't be worried about the grammar too much. And I will say I have had fights with editors about writing dialogue. That I have had I have had those conversations. I do sometimes have to have discussions with copy editors about how I'm writing for dialogue. But I think especially as we move to AI voices, writing scripts that sound more like humans is even more important, because a good voice actor can take a mediocre script and make it sound at least somewhat better and make it sound more human. But the AI voices give you zero wiggle room. If you don't like, a voice actor will probably add the contractions. The AI voices will not. And so you have to be better. You have to level up your dialogue writing in order to make it sound conversational when you're using AI voices. So I will put up my contact info in case you are interested in that. I have a blog. I have a bunch of things about writing. I am going to put one other thing up in the chat, which is that I am doing a webinar, a panel discussion next month with Training Mag Network with Rance Green and Garima Gupta, and I are all going to talk about storytelling and scenarios. And so that is that's on the schedule for November 19th, I think. Once the number of emails that went back and forth to get that on all three of our schedules was a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome, Christy. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being good sports and participating and doing some writing practice today.
Yeah. And so, Christy, yeah, you're going to be at DevLearn, and then you've got that webinar. Yeah, you've got a busy.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do have. Yeah, I have another. I do have another. I on my blog, I've got a bunch of things about storytelling and scenarios. I'll put that link in here too. There is, in fact, a whole section on writing. On writing scenarios and developing characters. I have a bunch of information about that. So my one with Rance, since Rance was here, I also do have, I actually have another webinar next week with Training Mag Network too. I'll put that link in here as well, which is on making e-learning relevant and authentic with scenarios. And so some of this we will talk is frankly will overlap with like having characters that match the details. There is some overlap in that session, but I have a free webinar next week.
So that's a free one.
That one's a free one. Yep. I have an online workshop with the Learning Guild next week, but they filled up we limited it to 75 spots because it's interactive, and they filled the spots in 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
We're trying something out, and so we'll see. I think there should be a wait list for that, but
Okay.
we'll see. There, if they get a lot, depending on how it goes, if they get because they got a lot of attendance, maybe we'll do another one.
Nice.
But
Okay.
lots of things going on. So
Yeah.
if you will be at anybody who will be at DevLearn, come find me and say hi.
If I go, there's still a
If you
chance I may go. Yeah, I'd love to go check it out. Yes, thanks, Elizabeth. All right. Well,
yeah.
thanks everyone. Don't forget, tomorrow should be pretty fun. We're going to wrap up the event with a D&D session. It's going to be a couple hours. Keegan just messaged me. He said he's going to onboard everybody in the session when we start tomorrow, and it should be fun. So if any of you players are out there, I'll be following up with an email to show you how to get into the session. And yeah, I totally recommend attending. I've been playing D&D for years and years and years, and I think it's great. So hopefully this can inspire you a little bit with your storytelling and learning. And with that, I'm going to just go ahead and close out the session. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks again, Christy.
Thank you.